Ever since 5-star Vanguard Texas came out with the beginning of the game, through her in Lapland, we've been hearing quite a bit about a place called Siracusano, but we've never had the opportunity to delve too deep into the region or the story surrounding its residents. But it's time to brush up on your Italian because Il Siracusano is here. As a super quick reminder, I talk about all units at max trust and welfares at max potential. Plus, when we talk about damage increases instead of attack ones, we're speaking of the numbers as if the units are attacking this very special test dummy that has 0 defense and 0 resistance, just so we can visualize the numbers better. So, without further ado, let's get into the units.
アンニェーゼからはルナカブと呼ばれている。お前もそう呼んでいいぞ。ここには食堂っていう好きにご飯を食べれる場所があると聞いたのだ。本当？どこにある？今すぐ行っていいか？
Lunacub is the 5-star of the banner and our newest Deadeye sniper, characterized by their large range, high attack but slow attack time, and prioritization of attacking enemies with the lowest defense. She has a module, so her E2 sheet will be including the extra HP and attack stats from that, and the buff it actually gives is allowing her to gain 1 extra SP each time she attacks without killing the target. Her talent already helps with the slow attack time thing, as at E2 it reduces her attack interval by 15% when she has a skill active, and when she doesn't, she'll gain camouflage, meaning she can't be targeted by enemy ranged attacks. This aspect of her talent being viable at both promotion levels. Skill 1 is a simple attack buff, raising it by 60% for 18 seconds. Yes, that says 18. I'm aware of the fact that the font I used makes it look like a 13. At E1, this brings her attack up to 1,419 and her DPS to 525.5. At E2 max, because of her talent, her attack time is decreased to 2.3 seconds. Her attack time is decreased to 2.3 seconds. Her attack is brought up to 1,827, and her DPS is now 794. M3ing it brings it up to 100% increase, leading her attack to be 2,284 and her DPS 993. Her second skill is the best of both worlds in terms of her talent. She'll gain plus 110 attack speed, leading her attack time to be 1.3 seconds at E1 and 1.1 at E2 because of her pre-existing skill-induced attack interval reduction, as well as an initial 5 seconds of camouflage. After that time is up, for the remainder of the 25-second skill, each time she defeats an enemy, she'll gain camouflage once more for 7 seconds. Completely opposite to her first skill, this one is all about speed instead of strength, bringing her DPS up to 682 at E1 max and 1038 at E2 max. M3ing it increases both the initial camo duration and extra she'll get after defeating enemies to 8 seconds, as well as bringing the attack speed buff to plus 140. This brings her attack interval down to 0.96 seconds, and consequentially her DPS up to 1,189.5. At 50 seconds, the skill does have a bit of a lengthier charge time, but within that nearly minute-long interval, she'll be able to attack 18 times, while during the skill, she'll be able to attack 26 times. It's nice to see a sub-niche within a subclass, Lunacub really honing in on the DPS aspect of her archetype. Also, she has a name that sounds like something someone would name their warrior cat's OC with a super tragic backstory back in the early 2010s, and I gotta respect her for it.
Salve, Doc. Sono un membro della famiglia Bellone. Ma lascia perdere, la famiglia non esiste più. Suppongo che abbiamo pagato il prezzo per aver apportato dei cambiamenti a Siracusa, per consolidare ulteriormente... Operatore Vigil a rapporto, Doc. Spero di lavorare presto con te.
With the addition of Vigil, this event's welfare, we officially have a Tactician Vanguard of every major rarity. The subclass is characterized by their ability to summon a tactical point and deal 150% damage when attacking enemies blocked by this summon. On the note of these tactical points, in Vigil's case, it's his wolf pack. He can summon a wolf pack formed of 2 wolf shadows, and every 25 seconds, the amount of wolf shadows increases by 1, up to 3 of them. Each wolf shadow increases their block count by 1 and causes their attacks to deal an additional hit. When the pack's HP reaches 0, it's revived right away but without the shadow heads, but it'll gain all of them back as the previously mentioned time span passes. Vigil already does more damage when attacking enemies blocked by the pack, but as well as that, him and his wolves will ignore 200 of the enemy's defense. Also, on his stat sheet I didn't include his DPS since he has a 1 second attack time, and, well, that means his attack is his DPS. No math needed, baby. Skill 1 is the basics. Immediately obtains 7 DP and summons 1 Wolf Shadow. This can be triggered every 24 seconds, and yep, that's it. There's no reason to M3 this other than if you're working on M9ing him out of love, so if that's the case, the only difference it'd make with this particular skill is decreasing the SP cost to 21 and increasing the initial SP to 5. Skill 2. He immediately obtains 2 DP and grants some effects to the wolf pack. Their next attack deals 170% damage and recovers 15% of their HP. If they happen to defeat an enemy with this, they also give you an additional deployment point. This is an auto-trigger skill that procs every 6 seconds, so even if you're literally only using this to generate DP, it ends up giving you more DP than the one skill of his that only serves that purpose. I know 2 doesn't seem like much and you can't always count on the wolf pack giving you another, but compared to the basic Vanguard skill, Assault Order type Gamma, it actually ends up giving you the exact same amount, 12 DP, after 38 seconds, which is that skill's charge time. Just thought that was interesting to mention. When it comes to the actual buffs, at E1 max, the wolf's next attack will be raised to 500, and depending on how many shadows you have, that hit could be dealt 2 or 3 times, leading it to be either 1000 or 1500 in total, and 15% of its max HP is 125, that being the amount it'll recover. At E2 max, the damage increase brings the wolf's next attack up to 631, and with the possible double or triple hit, that'll lead to a total of 1262 or 1893, while it recovers 165 HP. M3ing this skill reduces the cost to 5 seconds, as well as bringing the damage buff up to 200% and the HP recovery up to 20%. This new boost leads its attack to be 742 when there's 1 shadow, 1484 with the double hit of 2, or 2224 with the triple hit of 3, while the HP it'll recover is 220. Now we're at skill 3, which is the skill that makes Vigil. Having a 39-second charge time and lasting 15 seconds, over the duration of this skill, he'll gradually obtain 11 DP. His attacks will now deal 3 hits, and when Vigil and the wolf pack attack units blocked by them, they'll deal an additional bit of arts damage equal to 30% of Vigil's attack. This doesn't actually buff his attack, but the triple hit aimed at non-wolf blocked enemies will end up dealing 1626 damage, while it being aimed at enemies blocked by them will deal 2439. A quick reminder that this exact number is also his DPS while using this skill. As well as this, every 1 second from Vigil and every 1.25 seconds from the pack, the enemy being hit will be receiving an extra bit of arts damage, that being 163 each time. M3ing it decreases the charge time to 35 seconds and gives you 12 DP. His attacks still deal 3 hits, having the exact same numbers at level 7, but the extra arts damage is now 50% of his attack, being 271. Having all the swag and pizzazz of a 2013 DeviantArt OC, Vigil continues the trend of welfare operators just being pure fun. That third skill combined with an Auk and someone to make sure Vigil stays alive, sounding like the meme combination of dreams. Love a character who looks like they would unironically say "Rar X3.
Lavinia Falcone. Non sono più il giudice di Siracusa. Oggi presto servizio in veste di operatrice Penance. Spero che lavorare con Rhode Island mi aiuti a riscattarmi dalle mie trasgressioni.
We've got a good variety of people at Rhode Island. Soldiers, mercenaries, makeup artists, monks, bartenders, tons and tons of war criminals, and so many other things. But you know what we don't have? A judge. And Penance is about to change that. She's the non-limited 6-star of the banner and the newest Juggernaut defender, an archetype that's characterized by, well, being a defender that can't be healed by external sources and must instead heal themselves. Penance's form of self-heal is a little bit different. It's not exactly a self-heal, but it's instead gaining more HP. Isn't that the same thing? Well, yes, but also no. After deployment, she'll gain a barrier that's equal to 30% of her max HP. Whenever she defeats an enemy, her barrier to max HP capacity increases by 6% each time. capping at a total of 300%. Those are the E1 numbers, while at E2, the initial barrier starts at 50% and raises by 10% each time she defeats an enemy, still having the same 300% cap. The initial barrier, amount of barrier gained, and max barrier will all be in our stat sheet, and just so we're all on the same page, a barrier is basically a fancy word for extra HP. When enemies are attacking her, first they'll deplete her barrier HP, and once that's gone, they'll start getting rid of her actual HP. Her second talent is that whenever she still has her barrier, each time she's attacked, she'll reflect 50% of her attack and arts damage towards her attacker. Her first skill is an auto-trigger one, where after every 4 seconds, the next attack deals an additional hit of arts damage equal to 180% of Penance's attack, and has an additional charge effect of stunning the target for 3 seconds. At E1 max, the damage increase brings her next hit up to 1,301, and at E2 max, it brings it up to 1,649. M3ing it increases the damage of the next hit to 200%. Being 1,843, the charge effect stun time to 5 seconds, and it takes only 3 seconds to charge now. I mean, it's a simple skill, not much to say. Consistent damage increase, we've all seen it, but I will say the 3 to 5 second stun when charged is pretty nice. Her second skill makes her stop attacking enemies and instead deal 110% arts damage every second to all nearby enemies. She'll also gain 50% shelter while this skill is active, receiving that much less physical and arts damage, as well as increasing the barrier gain effect of her talent by 80%. At E1 max, the damage she'll be doing every second to all enemies in her range is 795, this lasting 20 seconds. Because of the 80% increase, her barrier cap is now 540%, so the total it can be is 19,224. And each time she defeats an enemy, she gains more barrier that's equal to 10.8% of her max HP, 385. At E2 max, the amount of damage she'll be doing is 1,008 every second, while her barrier gain is now 18% of her max HP, being 1,090. And with the 540% cap, the total amount of barrier she can have is an extra 32,697 HP. So basically, her total HP while having this skill active can be a max of 38,752, but you can never have too much health. So if you choose to M3 this, the shelter effect goes up to 60%, and she'll now deal 140% arts damage every second, that being 1,282. But the real kicker is that her barrier gain is increased by 100%, meaning each time she defeats an enemy, she'll gain more barrier equal to 20% of her max HP, being 1,211, and capping at 600%. That's 36,330, leading her to essentially be able to have 42,385 health while this skill is active, and that's honestly kind of insane. While skill 2 is very HP focused, Penance's third skill goes back around to being more about dealing damage. It starts with her immediately gaining some barrier equal to 100% of her max HP, so 6,055. It increases her attack interval by 0.9 seconds, leading it to be 2.5 seconds, but increases her attack by 320%. And if you remember that second talent of hers that reflects back arts damage equal to 50% of her attack, that's much more likely to happen now, as it also increases her taunt level. Her attack is raised to 3,847 with a DPS of 1,539, and each time she gets attacked, the attacker will receive 1,923.5 arts damage. The more damage the better, so if you choose to M3 this, no one will blame you. Now, she'll immediately gain a barrier equal to 130% of her max HP, that being 7,871.5, as well as having her attack increased by 400%. That brings it up to 4,580, and her DPS to 1,832, as well as reflecting back 2,290 arts damage whenever she's attacked. That's not even mentioning that there's a 20-second charge time and 30-second duration, and while that's great, I do feel that it's also just fair, considering her increased attack interval with the skill, so she has the time to attack 12 times while waiting for it and 12 times during it. Perfectly balanced, as all things should be. I'll be 100% honest. To me, Penance has the most banger design out of all these event units. When she first dropped on CN, I thought she was sort of bland because, I mean, compared to the usual Arknight's clothing, she kind of is. And don't get me wrong, considering that's her whole deal, this is a really cool twist on a judgy outfit. It's great, but it's actually really grown on me since then, and I appreciate the sleek beauty of it all. And that armor stuff on her arm, that's just so cool. I love it. Catch me committing crimes in Wolf Girl Italy just so I can have a trial and stare at Penance the whole time.
Ci si rivede, Doc. La piaggia di Siracusa può lasciarti la coda molto umida. Questo posto è decisamente più gradevole. Non preoccuparti. Exusie può farsi carico dei servizi di corriere, ma io accetterò qualsiasi compito mi si presenti.
And with that, we're finally at the girl of the hour, Texas the Omertosa. I'll admit, I'm not the biggest fan of how many alters Arknights has been releasing lately, but that's not to say these units don't deserve a version of themselves in the game that went down another path. And as a day one unit with hints of a backstory that made us question just how extensive this world is from the very beginning, Texas is without a doubt worthy of an alter. The real question is if we're worthy of her. Being an executor specialist, her entire archetype's deal is to be plopped down in the battlefield, do what they do with their passive skills, then, most of the time, be retreated as soon as the skill is over. Texas, however, essentially deploys herself twice in a row because of her talent. After defeating an enemy for the first time, recover all HP and reactivate the passive skill. So, while all of her skills may range from 7 to 12 seconds, they're technically double that as long as she manages to kill someone before the initial time runs out. And as we'll soon see, that isn't so hard. That's only part of this talent though, as depending on what promotion level she's at, she'll also gain a 10 or 20% attack buff while her skill is active. Because of that, on her stat sheet, the base DPS mentioned is with her talent in mind, since you won't really be leaving her on the field after her skills are up unless it's just an emergency extra block or something. Her second talent basically just helps her get to her first talent quicker, as it increases her attack speed by 8 before defeating an enemy, as well as reducing all damage taken by 25%. Since this only lasts until she defeats an enemy, I didn't find it necessary to add it to any of the stats, but for context, it'll bring her attack time down to 0.86 seconds. Texas does have a module, so I'll be including the extra stats on her E2 sheets, as well as talking about the attack buff it gives when we get to her skills. Said buff is plus 10% attack when she's deployed, and there are no friendly operators in the surrounding 4 squares, which is super easy to achieve, especially considering the nature of fast redeploy units. Her first skill lasts 12 seconds and increases her attack by 55%. Each time she attacks, she silences the target for 8 seconds, and for the duration of this effect, they'll receive 320 arts damage, totaling to 2,560 damage at the end of the 8 seconds. At E1 max, the buff itself brings her attack up to 908, giving her DPS of 976. At E2 max, it brings her attack up to 1,347 or 1,482 when she is around allies, and her respective DPSs up to 1,448 and 1,593.5. Entering it brings the attack buff up to plus 70%, and the silence effect now lasts 10 seconds. The damage the enemy receives while it lasts being 400 per second, totaling to 4,000 once it's over. Her new attack is 1,477 or 1,625 when alone, with her new DPS being 1,588 or 1,747. Out of all her skills, this is the weakest, as often is with first skills, but it's still a good mix of both physical and arts damage. So no matter if the enemy is heavier on resistance or defense, you can still chunk out some good damage on them. Plus, silent skills are always appreciated. Skill 2 makes her immediately deal 180% arts damage to all nearby enemies and inflicts minus 20% resistance to them for 10 seconds. Very useful considering the skill itself lasts 10 seconds, and for the remainder of it, Texas will deal arts damage with a 40% attack boost, each attack dealing a double hit. At E1 max, the initial burst of damage she'll deal is equal to 1,055, her attack being raised to 820, but ending up dealing 1,641 each time because of the double hit. leading her DPS to be 1764.5. If you've placed her near another ally, at E2 max the initial damage burst is 1564, while her attack is raised to 1217, dealing 2343 with a double hit and leading to a DPS of 2519. Placing her alone will raise those numbers a slight but noticeable bit, with an initial damage of 1721, an attack of 2677, and a DPS of 2878. M3ing this raises the immediate arts damage to 240%, her attack buff to plus 55%, and the enemy debuff to minus 30% resistance. When she's close to someone, the initial damage will be 2086, her attack damage 2694, and her DPS 2897, while if she isn't, those respective numbers will be 2294, 2964, and a grand DPS of 3187. Skill 3 finally gives us the visual we all know and love Texas for, her sword rain. After deployment, she immediately deals 130% arts damage 2 times to all nearby enemies and stuns them for 1.5 seconds. After this, she activates her sword rain every second against 3 different enemies within her range, dealing 100% arts damage and stunning them for 0.2 seconds each time. The very first bit of damage she'll deal is 2259, proceeding to deal 869 damage every second to 3 random enemies. And while that's just her normal attack value, she's dealing a total of 2607 damage every second, as well as stunning those poor souls. If she's alone, the initial damage is 2486, and the 3 enemies hit every second will be slapped with 956 damage each, totaling to Texas dealing 2868 damage every second. M3ing it will raise the initial damage to 165%. The double hit of that being 2868 when she's not alone and 3115 when she is. And everyone who got hit with that will be stunned for 2 seconds. After this, 4 targets in her range will be hit with the sword rain, it being 130% arts damage and still stunning them for 0.2 seconds. The damage dealt to a single enemy is 1130, allowing her to deal a total of 4520 damage every second, while also consistently stunning the 4 targets she's hitting. And when she's alone, these numbers of singular and total damage are 1243 and 4971. As with all her skills, killing just a single enemy will cause this to activate all over again, serving effectively as a crowd control skill with her stun locking. Talk about putting a whole new level of intensity to the saying, "It's raining daggers." Italians may be known for napping after a heavy meal, but Texas does not seem like she's up for resting after dishing out some great damage. And that's it for this one. I'm wishing everyone the absolute best of luck rolling on this banner. Limited units always have us more on edge considering, you know, the fact that they're limited. Even if you aren't particularly aiming to get Texas or even any of the new units, I'm still wishing you the best of luck with this banner because of the free rolls. Who doesn't love free rolls? And for the people who are aiming for Texas, eat some pizza and watch The Godfather while rolling, and that'll serve as a great catalyst. Trust. Sorry if I sounded a little sick or wonky during this, it's because I am. My sinuses are usually god-awful during this time of year, and I have a mild cold to boot. I use nose spray so my voice would sound less nasally, but it can never fully go away, plus my throat is just so scratchy right now. I've drank so much tea while recording this, hoping that I can hide it. If you're able to, please consider supporting me on Buy Me a Coffee, where for only $3 you can help me pay my bills, as well as getting a doodle of any character you request. My throat hurts so much, so that's all I have to say. If you're new here, feel free to stick around. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you another day.